Welcome, everyone. This is Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. This is our periodic showing of sort of the core presentation of Hopium, a presentation called "With Democrats, Things Get Better." And in many ways, the Hopium Chronicles project is a descendant of this presentation that I began giving in this current form in 2017. I've been doing a deck like this for going all the way back almost 20 years in various forms, but this particular one really began in 2017. And we're going to go straight through 30 minutes or so, 35 minutes, and then we'll take questions at the end. And it will be recorded and be able to be shared with folks, but the deck is not released. So just make sure that as we begin, that if you haven't read my interview in the New York Times last week with Adam Nagurney, it's a good one. I think you'll enjoy it, and it helps really lay out my current thinking about where the election is. And we're not going to talk about the election today. We're going to be talking about other things. But just to remind everybody, my core take on the election is that Joe Biden, is a good president. The Democratic Party is strong, and the Republicans have Trump, who is the ugliest political thing any of us have ever seen. And that in every way possible, I would much rather be us than them. And we also know that the polling has clearly improved for Biden and the Democrats over the last few weeks. I write about this extensively today on Hopium, and there's also a whole new presentation I released this morning that goes in depth. So if you need a deep dive on the current state in 2024, there's a lot of material on the site for you to do that. We're going to do something slightly different today. Our story here begins in 1989. With when the Cold War ends and a new age begins. And can people just confirm with me that you're seeing the slides advance? That would just be, I'm going to take a second and pause. Just want to make sure this is the problem we had last week. If you can type into the Q&A, I'm getting thumbs up. Okay, great. And our presentation, this discussion today starts in 1989. Cold War ended and a whole new era began, a new age of globalization began. And I think we forget sometimes how much things have changed since then. There's been a lot of change in America and in the world. And we have seen, hold on a second. This is my list of the things that have changed since this time during this period, right? And it is really remarkable. And the most important change that's happened was the development of a single global economy and a global system, the rise of the rest, as Fareed Zakaria called it. And it fundamentally changed both the economics of the United States and our politics. But all these other things have happened too. It's been a time of enormous change and transformation here and around the world. And I think what I'd like to do today is I want to look at American politics through the prism of how well the two parties have managed against this change. This is the core kind of structure and the way we're going to use our day today, which is this concept of managing against change. And any of you have worked in an organization or led an organization, that managing against change is actually really hard as things change, to help adjust, your entity to changes that are happening, to anticipate them, to get ahead of them, to master them, to not let them master you, right? And so let's look at how the two parties have done in response to all these changes. On this very, very basic measure, which is jobs created on their watch, we've seen Democrats repeatedly perform very, very well during this period, and Republicans really struggle. Trump, who is running for reelection, is the first president who had net job loss on his watch since Herbert Hoover back in the 1920s and early 1930s. And when you look at this now going forward, when you add up Obama and Clinton, because when I began this presentation in 2017, Trump hadn't happened yet, or Biden. Sorry, let me just drink a little water. It has been remarkable that Clinton and Obama created many, many more jobs, right? 17 times more jobs than the last three Republicans combined. And then you had Biden, who has seen, record job formation on his watch, really historic job formation. We today are living in a place where we have the best job market in America since the late 1960s. And then when you look at it per month, which is another way that we've cut it, in which the White House uses a version of this graph all the time, Republicans averaged 10,000 jobs created per month over 16 years. Last month, there were 303,000 jobs created in a single month. That would be 2.5 years of job growth under Republicans. This is a really dramatic slide, in my view, or graph, because it just shows what an extraordinary failure the Republican Party's been over now a very long period of time. And, they're critical of Biden's management of the economy when we're averaging, 2 to 3 years of Republican job growth in a single month, again and again and again. And somehow that's bad, right? But then when you look at the unemployment rate, okay, here we go. The unemployment rate shows a similar story, right? It's gone up under Republicans, it's gone way down under Democrats. And then this slide, which is in some ways the money slide of this presentation, when you add this all up since 1989 and the Cold War ended and a new age of globalization began, there have been 51 million jobs created in America. 49 million of them, essentially all of them, have been created under Democratic presidents. There's been one political party in America that's done its part, led us forward, created progress for the country, and another that's repeatedly let us down. And we can just keep going through data here. This is GDP growth, right? Biden is averaging more than 3 times the rate that Trump averaged on his presidency and way above the 2 Republican presidents. And we also know that during this period since 1989, we've seen exploding wealth in America. Extraordinary levels of wealth have been created in this country, probably more than in any other period in our history, because our companies were well equipped that when we went from 1.5 billion customers that were available to us in the late 1980s to 7 billion, the American companies were able to take advantage of this huge explosion of consumer base all around the world. And so we've innovated and we've built remarkable historic companies in America. And so the Dow has gone way up, right? It's 17 times what it was in 1989. This is an extraordinary level of wealth creation. The gains that we've seen in the stock market and wealth creation in America has happened almost entirely under Democrats. As you can see that under Clinton and Obama, the stock market exploded. And it hasn't done as well under Biden, but a lot of other things have gone really right under Biden. And so this is a track record that we should be very proud of. We also know that for Democrats, we care a lot, not just about the wealth that's created, but its distribution, right? How is everybody doing, And on this, all Americans have gotten ahead, or I should say, the median, right? But Americans are making much more money today than they were 20, 30 years ago. It isn't 17 times more. So if you were invested in the stock market, you own real estate, you've gotten way ahead. But American workers have gotten ahead. I mean, this idea that people are falling behind or are less wealthy or have less money than they had 20, 30, 40 years ago, it's just completely not true, right? And but we can still do better, right? It's not a question. We shouldn't accept this. We can still do better. And on an issue that matters a lot to our ongoing debate, Republicans have also been the party of fiscal recklessness. We've been the party of fiscal responsibility. The deficit's gone up every time a Republican's come to office. It went up by historic amounts under Trump, and it's come down under Democrats repeatedly. We're the party of fiscal. If you are looking for a party that creates growth, higher wages, booming stock markets, lower deficits, that's the Democratic Party. There's only one political party in America good at this capitalism thing, and it's been us. And this to show you, just to put it in historic context, this is the deficit under Trump. This is from World War II. This is as a percentage of GDP, and you can see this extraordinary. Trump, no big surprise. The guy who's seen serial bankruptcies, right, was the most fiscally profligate president in modern history. And I also want to just note here that Clinton, was able to get us to surplus in recent times. We actually were, until the Bush tax cuts came. I mean, so if these fiscal policies had been left into place, America would have retired all of its debt by 2010. And so there is an argument to be made that all the debt, the collective debt that we have today is really due to Republican economic policies, because certainly the Democrats have always lowered the deficit, right? They've increased it. And so, this whole conversation around fiscal responsibility is completely upside down. And I just want to remind everybody just how ridiculous the Republican argument is right now, is that, they say every day we shouldn't be spending overseas, we shouldn't be spending money in Ukraine, we should be spending it here at home. And then Democrats say, well, look, we just passed these three huge investment bills for the future that are going to create growth and opportunity for workers for a generation. And the Republican response is, well, we want to cut it all of it. Right? And it just goes to the core of how absurd the current Republican Party is on economic issues, on fiscal issues. I mean, if you read my work, I mean, one of the theories I have is that Republicans have really not had economic policies. They've had a fiscal strategy, which is to cut taxes and to give those people they view to be undeserving less money. And the thing is, it doesn't work economically. It may work as a social policy, right? Which is a manifestation of racial fear and the racial construct of the modern Republican Party. It just doesn't work economically. And we have to stop pretending that it does. The emperor has no clothes. The Orange Emperor and his party have no clothes here. So let's spend a few minutes talking about Biden, right? Because there's no question that the American can-do spirit is alive and well today, right? Real GDP growth has been higher here in the United States post-pandemic than any other advanced economy in the world by significant margins. We have, as I said, the best job market since the 1960s. We are in the midst of what has been the only two times since World War II the job market has been better than it is today, has been during the Korean War and the Vietnam War. So we are actually living in a period of the best peacetime economy in the best peacetime economy in America since World War II, right? The best peacetime job market since World War II. An overwhelming majority of Americans, probably 70% of Americans, have never been alive when the job market is as good as it is today. And this is just fact. Right? We also know that wealth has increased dramatically for American workers. This is median family wealth in recent years. You can see it went up substantially during this recent period. And look at the growth that's happened for people under 35, right? We've seen this huge jump in wealth, but all Americans have made out well in recent years, right? This is median, it's not average. It's really important if you know the math on this. I mean, this means that people have gotten further ahead. And we also know that one of the most important measures of sort of the health and vitality of the economy, which is new business formation, I need to update this slide, but it frankly hasn't changed at all, is we're seeing now years of sustained new business formation, heightened new business formation under Biden. This is incredibly important for the health and vitality of the American economy. Can-do spirit is alive and well. We also have seen, and this is a little bit hard to read, that we've seen a huge explosion in Black and Hispanic home ownership, stock ownership, business ownership of all kinds. Obviously really important for getting Black and Hispanics to be able to participate in this economy that has boomed so much, not just to be wage earners, but to be able to do more than that. And we know that today we live in a period where we have the lowest uninsured rate in American history, right? This is due to Democratic policy. The ACA has now gotten us to a place where we have the fewest people are uninsured as a percentage of the population in our history. Congratulations, everybody. If Florida and Texas had done Medicaid expansion like so many other states, that number would probably be under 4% or even 3%. Manufacturing, as all of you know, this has now been, well documented that because of the president's big three economic laws that he passed, there's been an explosion of private sector investment in creating new manufacturing plants in the United States. This was a central goal of Biden, his economic plan. It's working remarkably well. And we also know that inflation has, despite what happened last month, which by the way was the inflation rate barely changed, right? It changed by 1/10 of a point. And that we still know that that it was only 1/10 of a point higher than what was expected. So we're still in this place around in the mid threes on inflation. We know that inflation is a global challenge. It's not just here. It's actually lower here than any other G7 country. And we know that one of the big drivers of it is gas prices are going up, which my expectation is that Russia and Saudi Arabia are going to do everything they can to raise gas prices before the election in order to try to elect Donald Trump. And I think this is going to be an orchestrated strategy, and we're going to need to start talking about it. Because the Republican argument is that gas prices went up before because of Joe Biden's war on energy. And we'll get to that in a second. I want to be very clear about what's happening with food because this gets talked about a lot. This slide's a couple months old now, but even in the new data, many prices of many food items have come down or dropping. The inflation for food at home, groceries, was only 1% over the last year. And so, yes, food did go up, right? Because food is also dependent upon energy, right? Anything that, because of the fertilizer and the shipping of food products, that when the gas prices went up, food prices went up. And also we know there's been corporate gouging of all this, but this notion that we have to be able to be agile enough to recognize that on food we've made enormous progress, and this is very good news for the United States. And also wages continue to be at historically elevated levels. I didn't update this slide. This is from March. It's dropped a little bit down since then, but we also, if you can see, right, I mean, wage growth here is very elevated over the last 30 years, and also today, real wages are increasing at a more rapid rate than any time in the last 25, 30 years, even with inflation where it is. We're seeing enormous, still strong real wage growth in the United States. And we also know that by many other measures of people's lives, when you look at questions like, are you happy with your life? Are you happy with your job? Are you happy with your income? Those are at very elevated levels. I've been really surprised by this data because there is this impression that everyone is really down on the economy. A, that's not true, right? Because if it was, we wouldn't be winning elections all over the country. And B, we know that Democrats are actually really happy with Joe Biden's leadership on the economy. It's Republicans who are really unhappy with Joe Biden. So it's not about lived experience, right? Because if it was about lived experience, there wouldn't be a difference between Democrats and Republicans in their view of the economy. It's a political construct. And when you go to these other measures of the economy, life satisfaction, or America, life satisfaction, job satisfaction, income satisfaction, we're at very, very elevated levels. As you can see here, this is now a year old, but we've seen questions around worker satisfaction in their jobs are at the highest ever recorded. So this idea that there's sort of huge discontent in the country is not true. It is true in a single measure of it. By many other measures, it isn't. And if there was significant discontent in the country, we wouldn't have been winning all these elections recently. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's been absurd is the central argument, which we're about to hear again, because gas prices are going up, that somehow Joe Biden created rising gas prices through what they call the Democratic war on energy. And yet last year, we actually saw more oil, gas, and renewables produced in America in any year in our history. And America produced more oil last year than any country's ever produced in the history of the world, by the way. So this idea that if Joe Biden is waging a war on energy, he's doing a pretty poor job because we're actually seeing record production across the board. Crime, which is another issue that's been, front and center in this election, is also murder rates and crime rates have come way down. Violent crime rates have come way down in the last couple of years. We had, crime rates went way up under Donald Trump. They've come way down under Joe Biden. And it's really important psychologically that we understand that we're living in a far safer country today than we were, 30, 35 years ago. For anyone who lived in urban areas during this time and is a little bit older, we're all aware of how much safer the cities are in America than they were. And I think the data on this is really dramatic. I mean, the violent crime rate in the United States is about a half of what it was, 30, 35 years ago. That's a big change. And places, there are cities where, the murder rate now is 1/8 or 1/10 of what it was, 30, 35 years ago. The country is far safer today, with the exception of crimes committed with assault weapons, obviously. And also the murder rate, for all they're crowing about this, the murder rate is much higher in Republican states than it is in Democratic states, which is and I credit Third Way with having done this research. Also, on immigration, it's really important to recognize that during the Obama-Biden administration, the number of undocumented immigrants in the country went down. That this idea that Democrats are for open borders and flooding the country with immigrants is not true. It's not actually in any way a part of our policy. We're dealing today with a new set of border challenges, which we can talk about in the Q&A if you want. But I show this because this has also kind of gone into the memory hole a little bit about how successful we were in managing the border under the last Democratic administration. And I'll come back to that in a little bit. So bottom line here, how we do in America, right? We're kicking ass, right? And you look at all this stuff. I mean, we are clearly far better off today than when Biden came into office. I think we have a very strong case for reelection. The economy is some of the strongest. There are people living in this country who may never experience an economy this strong ever again in their lifetime. And we have to stop being psyched out by the other side of this stuff, right? There isn't lived experience problems. We can go through all of this. People are very happy with their lives right now. They're not happy. I mean, I just showed, and I wrote about this in Hopium, and I should have used this today, I'll add it, that in the swing states, the Wall Street Journal poll that came out 2 weeks ago, when asked about, is the economy better in your state? It's 20 to 30%. I mean, the number of people I forget now exactly the data, but it shows that there's an incredible awareness in the public that their own states have really prospered, where they think the national economy is not doing well. Now, why does that matter? It matters. It means that we're going to win the reelection. In my view, this is a central data point if you want to understand how we're going to win reelection. That in the battleground states that are going to determine the White House, people believe that there's been strong economic gains in their own states. It's going to be easier for us to connect the dots there, I think, during the campaign. So, folks, I would just want to say that Trump's central argument is that all these immigrants who have come into the country have ruined America, right? We've been living through a period of mass migration into the United States, really going back to starting in the 1950s. We've seen an enormous number of people come into the country. And what I just showed you is that by very many measures, we're doing better today than we've done potentially ever in the history of the country, right? And so, rather than seeing immigrants as having brought us down and led to decline, our success as a nation is intimately tied up with the immigration we've had. We've benefited, we've prospered, we've become stronger and better because of immigration. And, you see that also with globalization, right, that there isn't a huge anger towards globalization. Our party is very much liberal in the sense that it wants more immigration, more trade. It's outwardly focused. It's the Republican Party that's become reactionary. So by many measures, we're so much better today than we were. And I want to just go through this, that our success, I'm a little long here, so I'm going to cruise a little bit quickly now through the end here, is that we've won more votes. We've not just been successful in governing, we've been successful politically. And we've now won more votes in 7 out of 8 presidential elections. No American political party's done that in our history. And you can see that we've been averaging, about 4 points more than the Republicans now, going back a very long time. And the Republican Party has only broken 48% one time during this whole period. And yet they have 2 out of 3 Supreme Court justices. We've had a really strong run since 2018 and 2020. We've been winning all across the country post-Dobbs. It's been an extraordinary performance for a party in power. A party in power is almost always lose power. We've been gaining power. We're stronger today than we were in 2022. And the Republicans continue to struggle. And you see, this is party ID over time. You can see that the country is marginally more democratic. I mean, if there is a center-left political party in America, if there is a majority party in America, it's us. We're much closer to being a majority party than the Republicans. And, if I'm right about all this, right, that since 1989, you've had good Democratic presidents and crappy Republican presidents, then people who've grown up politically during this time, right, who should be more Democrat than Republican. And that's true. And we've now started seeing this huge structural change among young voters in the country based on their lived experience, right, as we use that term. And you notice here, it's really important that young people were not always Democrat. I mean, young people were a jump ball here post-Reagan, right, in this period. But you can see now, starting from 2006 on, we've been doing really, really well with younger voters. And in the two elections where we did very poorly, we had bad performance here. So this is really important. Young people, doing well with young people is essential to our success. For those of you who follow Hopium, you know that this is a core part of my whole narrative. And I just want to remind everybody that from 2008 to 2020, we've averaged, we've averaged 4.5 points more than Republicans during this period. And we've averaged 51% of the vote. This is the best performance of the Democratic Party at the presidential level, since FDR's presidency. So we're in the midst of our best popular vote run that we've been on since FDR. And we're also in the midst of one of the best party in power runs and off-year elections in modern American history. The Democratic Party is strong, everyone. We're unified. We're raising lots of money. We're winning elections all across the country. And this shows what's happening to the generations, right? This is a reason why the country's, is if there is, again, a majority party in America, it's us, because the older folks who are more Republican there's less of them than there used to be. And there are more of these voters, right, who are leaning our way. So despite all the success we've had, we're still dangerously underperforming on the economy. And even though I showed you all these measures of health on these sort of very basic questions, I think my view is that Biden came out of the election in 2020 in a deficit on the economy. He made a deep connection with voters on COVID, and he has met his central promise that he's got us to the other side of COVID successfully. This is what he said he was going to do. He's done it. But he didn't make a deep economic connection with voters during the election in 2020. Here you have voters who voted on the economy. Trump won those voters by 60 points. It's hard to believe. And even though we were in the midst of a terrible recession, Trump was still favored in 2020 on the economy by 12 points. We're still living with this. I mean, my view about this is the shutdown Democrat attacks on Biden stuck, and we've had a hard time getting out of that. And so I think he's still underperforming poll-wise from the performance of the Democratic Party going back all the way to 1989, and frankly, his own performance. And this is a really important issue. I mean, I can show you data that from the early days of the administration, this is, overall, how are we doing, right, against the Republicans? We had, Biden got huge numbers on COVID, huge numbers on healthcare, much lower numbers on the economy. This is June of 2021. And I can show you similar data here going all the way up to today. We continue to underperform, I think, our actual performance on the economy. I think this matters. I mean, look, people understand things are better, but they have to now believe that things are better because of Joe Biden, right? I mean, this is the connection. And I think this is what a campaign can do. I think we can get this done during this election. So let me take a drink of water, conclude. So Joe Biden talked about this speech, the FDR For Freedom speech, in his State of the Union just a few weeks ago. And he talked about it as the speech that rallied America and the world to fight against autocracy in Europe and authoritarianism in Europe. And for me, this speech is the most important political speech given in American English, perhaps in our history, because it laid out a vision for the world after World War II that was based on freedom and not dominion and not autocracy. This was a powerful formulation. And this speech, those four freedoms became the basis of the Atlantic Charter in 1941, which was the charter between the United States and the UK, which created the alliance that won World War II. They became the foundation of the United Nations Charter in 1945, which was the vision of the modern world, where we'd resolve our differences peacefully and not through war. They were the basis of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which negotiated by Eleanor Roosevelt, which created this understanding of the intrinsic value of every human, not just of states, but of individual people and their ability to achieve their dreams and live the lives that they want to live, and bake that into international law, right? These were huge advancements from the period that we had been in before of autocracy and colonialism. All of this flowed out of this speech in 1941 and the Four Freedoms articulation that FDR had. And what I will tell you is that since that period in the 1940s and that world that FDR imagined, we have created a golden age in human history. And there's never been a better time to be alive than there is during this period of four freedoms and Pax Americana, we've had more people living under democracies than any time in world history. We've seen life expectancy explode, from 45 years. Now it's even higher than this. This data is a little bit old. It's up into the low 70s. Incredible world societal achievement. We've seen an explosion of literacy that is almost unimaginable in human history. What's happened about how many people now are literate and can do and operate in complex societies in a way they couldn't before. And we've also seen an extraordinary plummeting of extreme poverty despite a huge growth in the global population, right? This is a golden age to be alive. There's never been a better time to be alive in all of our history as during this period. And what's important for everyone who's watching today to realize is that we did that. The Democratic Party of the United States of America did that. We imagined that world based on the four freedoms, and we fought to make it so and preserve it and modernize it and adjust it and grow it over time. Bill Clinton's presidency in 1992 was all about extending this global system to the rest of the world after communism, which he did successfully, I believe, in the 1990s. And it's why that I believe that the Democratic Party that we're all part of has done more good for more people than any other organized political force in all of human history. It's a rather remarkable legacy and party to be part of. And I think it's really important as we go forward during this time of enormous challenge in the United States that we lean into our storied history a little bit more. And I don't mean the storied history of the Democratic Party of the 19th century, right? But the Democratic Party of the 20th and 21st century. We have done extraordinary things. We've made America and the world far better. And we should be leaning into this legacy far more aggressively, I think, as we look to chart the next course during a time of enormous challenge, where this global system that we built, this golden age that we've created, is under unprecedented threat now by Russia, China, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and even MAGA itself here domestically. We have a lot of work to do. And I think what's important about the Republicans is that I used to say in this presentation that they failed to do their part, but we now know that that's not actually fair or accurate. It's actually they've descended to something dangerous, malevolent, and even Trump 2024 is far more dangerous, malevolent than he was in 2020. And we just saw more evidence of that in Arizona this week. And so, we recognize that we are not in a normal time in America, that we have one political party that's done extraordinary things for a long period, another party that's lost its way and has now become something dark and dangerous. And it's why one of the goals of this presentation is to try to move us beyond this sort of simplistic left and right Democrat Republican frame that dominates our discourse. It really is about one good modern party that's continued to do good things for the American people, and then this other party which hasn't. And any effort to create symmetry or equivalency between us, we have to reject because it's inaccurate and unfair. And this is part of the challenge for the national media right now to get beyond the he said, she said, Democrat, Republican, left, right frame. The Republicans are desperate to create a left, right frame in our politics because it obscures their failures and their malevolence. We don't have to be part of that. Part of our job is to not buy into that and to understand the truth here, which is that there's been one really good party and one really bad party in America, and there's no symmetry whatsoever. And as we remember, right, here we are, that, there's been 51 million jobs created in America, 49 million created under Democrats. And so the problem with the United States today isn't, Washington or politics isn't broken, right, or corporate greed or anything else. The problem with America is that one of our two parties is in severe decline. And what used to be known as the party of Lincoln and Reagan has now become the party of insurrection for all time. And this is the central challenge that we have as a country. It's not that the country has failed or stumbling. It's actually done really well when we've been in power. It's that one of our two political parties has lost its way, become something deeply dangerous, and continues to let us down. And so if you need any reminder about the Republicans, let's just spend a minute looking at some pictures. Thanks, everybody. Join me in being loud and proud about the remarkable achievements of our party. We've been arguably the greatest and most noble force for good in all of human history. We have been called before to defend freedom here and around the world. We're being called again. And what makes me so satisfied and content and excited is that the American people are answering the call. You are answering the call by being here today. Millions of Americans are getting up every day and doing work to preserve and save their democracy. We are once again, as a political party, answering this great historic call. That's why I think we're going to win all of this. And remember, these 4 freedoms, these are critical. Spend time with them every day. This may be the most powerful formulation of what the world needs to be in the English, and certainly in the history of English. But it has been arguably one of the most important speeches ever given in all of human history because of what it created. And so thank you, everybody. Join me on Substack. Keep fighting really hard. Let's take some questions. Let me go back. Let me pull out of. Okay, let me go to Q&A and let me see what you got for me. Yeah, no, thank you. And listen, remember, if you thought this was cool, share with all your friends, right? We all need to see this a little bit more. I'm gonna try not to answer kind of hardcore political questions today. I mean, I have this other venues for that here at Hopium. I really would like to try to stay focused on I want to stay focused on this presentation today. Let me just sort of try to summarize some of the comments and questions I'm seeing here. I released all of this material you've seen today exists at Hopium in various forms, right? This presentation came before Hopium. And you also notice that some of the slides that are in here are slides that ended up getting used by the White House, by the way. I mean, this stuff has been widely seen, but it's integrated into the day-to-day, right, of what we do. And I'm going to work as part of, I wrote today in the Hopium community that I'm trying to raise a little bit of extra money here to sort of expand our content offerings. One of them is to sort of take this presentation to the next level. I mean, I think this thing is ready to go to a different place, whether, Paul, it means me releasing the deck in some form, but all the data that's in here exists in Hopium in our day-to-day stuff. And also this video exists, right? And it's really important that I think it's really important for you to try to get people to watch the whole thing. And I know it's sitting for 30 minutes, it's too long, but I think there's no way to convey all of this without doing it in the sort of the way I'm doing here, right? And I think it's overwhelming. I mean, it paints a very powerful picture and it's a story that needs to be told. But Hopium, my whole Hopium project is descended from this presentation, meaning that I came to my understandings that led me to Hopium through this work I did in Building with Democrats, Things Get Better, and recognizing the greatness and goodness of our country and how MAGA's central strategy, one of its central strategies, is to spread negative sentiment in our discourse, to want us to feel bad about our country, our leaders, our institutions, each other, right? Everything. They want us to feel bad. And that part of our job to respond to MAGA is to talk about all the good that we've done as a country, as a party. And I talk about how one of the goals I have at Hopium is to give people permission to love their country again, right? And to not feel like that's somehow an inauthentic way of understanding. I mean, we do live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We are part of arguably the most important political party that there's ever been. And we can say these things without buts or howevers or commas or semicolons or anything else. It's just all true, right? Are we perfect? Of course not. Do we have work to do? Yeah. Have we gotten everything done that we wanted to get done? No. But my God, the report card on our party going back since 1989, I'd give us an A, right? Not an A minus, not a B plus, not a B, an A. I'd give them an F, right? And, we have to be able to celebrate our wins. We have to be able to live in a space of progress, right? Because at the end of the day, for voters, do you want to be with the party that's actually made things better, or do you want to be the party that makes things worse? We have to claim credit to having used government to make things better in order to build the liberal/progressive case, because it isn't building the liberal/progressive case isn't that we have failed. If your narrative is we haven't done enough, we haven't come far enough, right? Then why would you go with that party? If the admission is that you failed and you've been unable to achieve your, the things that you want to achieve, you're actually giving people a reason to not be for you rather than to be for you. And so we have to live in politics. In the advocacy world, you live in a place where the glass is always half empty, where you're saying there are still things we need to do. In the political world, to bring voters along on your political project, in the electoral political world, you need to start from this place that we've come a long way and we have a long way to go. Because if people don't believe that you've made things better, there's simply no reason to be for you. And so part of this is about, I think, rethinking the way that we understand the center left project, the history of the United States. If we want to win against MAGA, we have to be able to say that when we've been in power, we've made things better. And if the perception is that if we failed to achieve our goals, then we're no better than MAGA. So this is actually very important stuff, and foundationally, in terms of how I think we're going to conduct the campaign, in going forward. And I also just want to say that I think there's this sometimes inside of our family, there's sort of a self-indulgence, I think, about the criticism of Biden and the Democrats that, and is in some ways delusional about all of this stuff, right? And is about recognizing the extraordinary progress that we made, the incredible greatness of this country and the Democratic Party. And part of my job here is to help have people have this historical understanding of what we've been able to do, because Joe Biden's job is to sell him. It isn't his job to sell this, right? This is a different story than the story Joe Biden has to tell, because he's got to go sell his story. He has to say that I've been successful. You asked me to go get us to the other side of COVID. I've done that successfully. I've done all these other things. And if you give me a second term, here's how I'm going to make things better. That's what this campaign is going to be about. And it's why I'm so fundamentally optimistic, because I think on this core question, are we better off? Oh my God, yes. Are we wildly better off? And I don't care what the Republicans say. It's all bullshit. They're a tornado of bullshit every day coming out of the right and Fox News, historic propaganda machine. Think about where we were on January 20th, 2021, right? The vaccines hadn't come, the economy had crashed. Trump had just allowed hundreds of thousands of Americans to die unnecessarily because of his mismanagement of COVID. The global economy was teetering. We had an insurrection against the United States. The first time we had never had a peaceful transfer of power. There was no traditional presidential transition. Trump didn't show up at the Biden's inaugural. And, the Capitol that I live in was under essentially military occupation for 50 days after the insurrection in January, because there had been an unprecedented attack on our political system. That's what Joe Biden inherited. And look where we are today, right? Yeah, the threat of MAGA is still there, everybody. We know that. But that's why we're here, right? Because we're arming ourselves, making ourselves more capable information warriors in this campaign that we all need to be able to be in order to prevail against MAGA. Let me just look at some other questions and try to summarize them, because I appreciate everybody coming here today. Again, I'm not gonna go into, and by the way, the administration, I want to be very clear. I mean, the slide that I showed you about the jobs per month, the White House just took that slide. I mean, that's now one of their core slides. I mean, that came from this deck, because no one had ever done in economic data. People don't look at jobs per month. It's not a thing, right? Because it's annual job growth and everything else. But in the early days of Biden, we needed a way of articulating how many jobs are being created. And so I created this slide of jobs per month in the White House. The White House has seen this, they all know about it, and I've helped inform them, and they produce an enormous amount of economic data analysis all the time. It may not be getting to you, right? But they're in this game. And we need to, let me answer the question about why don't we know more about this? I have a couple theories about that. I think one is, as I said, each time a president is in charge in our party, their job is to sell themselves, right? Their job isn't to tell this bigger story. That's, in this case, this is my job or our job, right? And so there isn't really this kind of historical perspective that when you're in the White House, you got to just go sell your guy. And when you're a senator, you sell that senator. And when you're a House member, you sell that House member. And when you're a governor, you sell that. And there isn't, this is the project of a party, right? I'm a party guy, and I believe in the party. I believe in the Democratic Party. And so I think that's one thing. Second thing is that I think we've been handicapped in the Democratic Party by this idea that because not everybody is doing better, not everybody, right, but a majority, most, then we can't make these claims because we're going to alienate people that aren't doing better. You hear this articulated all the time. It's part of the discussion today. It was part of the discussion in 2016 and 2012. And I just disagree with that, because I think if you think about this for a second, if you're a struggling person who's not getting ahead in your life and you are looking out at the big world out there, and we come to that struggling person and say, listen, people are doing better. Things are getting better. There's a real opportunity that if you work hard, we give you opportunities that you're going to be able to make your life better, because that's what Democrats do, right? We make things better for people. Is that a better argument, or everything is terrible, we suck, things aren't better for everybody, and so now you're screwed, right? And I think that there has been this theory of the case in the family that I fought against in 2015 and 2016 inside the Obama-Clinton thing, that we can't take credit for what we've done because we will alienate people that don't feel that they have benefited at that moment. And so therefore we don't take credit, right? We feel people's pain. We tell them, that rather than saying, hey, there is an objective reality out there. And the objective reality is that we've made things a lot better for people. And because things are better for everybody else, it's far more likely that you're going to be successful, because things are successful for far many more people. It's far less likely that if you're a struggling person, you'll be successful if everything is terrible. And so I think we have psyched ourselves out in some ways of taking credit for the good things that we've done. There's a line, right, in sports that you can't score unless you shoot. People aren't going to know what we've done unless we tell them. And we haven't been telling them. And there's been a political theory about why we haven't been telling them. And that theory, in my view, is wrong and destructive. And it's something that I have been ideologically fighting for, more than a decade now. Bill Clinton, who I worked for, always said that an optimistic, fiscally responsible Democrat was the most powerful positioning in American politics. And I've always believed that optimism is our superpower as a party. And it's, core to my understanding of how I've constructed opium. And then finally is that the Republicans have a far more powerful propaganda machine than we do. I talk a lot about this at Hopium. It's one of the central reasons I founded Hopium, was that to help us understand that getting louder is a huge priority for us collectively. And we get loud very effectively in campaigns, and that's where we've been winning. But we need to get louder 24/7, 365. And the way I talk about this is we need to think of ourselves as, I worked in the war room 32 years ago. And we need to think of the war room now, not as 20 sweaty kids drinking Red Bulls and producing TikTok videos, but as 2 to 3 million proud patriots who love their country, who are taking information like this and moving it through their networks. I mean, if you like this presentation today, you should email it to everybody that you've ever met, right? You should be sharing it widely through all of your networks and challenging people to watch it and engage the material the way that you have. We have more agency here than we understand. If we can build a war room of 2 to 3 million proud patriots, we can drown out, or at least be competitive, I think, with the Republicans. I don't think we need a Fox News. I think we have us. And I think us is pretty good, right? Us has been winning elections. Us is building the most powerful democratic grassroots machine that we've ever had. Now we have this other thing we need to do too, which is we need to get louder. We need to build what I call information age victory gardens. We need to have a consciousness that we have agency here, and that by spreading this information through your networks and singing the praises of Joe Biden, that we can counter them, because it's going to be millions of us, not just, you're not alone. You're a voice in a very loud chorus. You don't have to do all the work yourself. And what's important is that Tucker Carlson was able to become the most powerful commentator in American politics with 3 million viewers a night. Imagine if 2 to 3 million people each reach 10 people every day. That's 20 to 30 million people every day. And I go back to the story that I often tell, that on Hopium a few months ago, a woman named Irene, who I don't know, but she's a paid subscriber and part of our chat every day. And she said, Simon, I went to dinner with 3 of my girlfriends and they were dumping on Joe Biden. And I used the material I'd gotten from Hopium and I told them about what a good president he's been. And by the end of the dinner, they'd come around and I felt like they were really supporting Joe Biden. Well, we have to do that every day at all time, right? Every interaction we have, the networks we're in, we're part of this. Don't ask what Joe Biden's doing or what the DNC is doing. What are you doing, right? Use the Kennedy thing, flip it around, right? Or flip it and apply it to this, that we have more agents here than we know. And I'm giving you permission structure based on that's my bulldog Tug over here, who's 11 and a half and grumpy and barks a lot. That Tug and I are giving you permission structure, creating permission for you to become an information warrior for your democracy. And this is what part of what we need to do. Susan asks, are voters more comfortable with bad negative news than positive truths? I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I think that I've been, in my recent journey where I've been on television a lot and I've been, on Hopium. I mean, Lawrence O'Donnell, which I'm now going on his show regularly, a few weeks ago, he said, Simon, I'm having you back because you're so popular with our audience, right? And I think what we have to do is we have to test this, right? I think we have to give Americans permission. We have to have the courage to not go into the snark, and we have to have the courage to love our country. We have to have the courage to fight for America in this information war every day and the greatness and goodness of our country. We can't give in to the snark. We can't give in to the naysayers. We can't give in to the negative sentiment. There's courage and strength required to not get up every day. And let me, we're getting to the end. And as the thing I'll say is that, part of what I'm trying to do at Hopium is to not start my day every day and to not have you start your day every day inside of a Republican frame, as Lakoff calls it, right? Where Joe Biden's a bad president, he's old, he's stumbling, the economy's terrible, war on energy. Their propaganda machine is more powerful than ours. And so every day, if you just sort of get up and engage in the information space, it's not neutral, right? It leans Republican. And you guys hear all this stuff through social networks, everything else. Russia, China are helping amplify. It's a massive propaganda machine, right? Well, part of what I'm trying to do at Hopium is to help you start your day every day, not there, but in this other place, right? And this other place is you start with the day that we're good. Joe Biden's good. The country's a great country, not all of the bullshit and the negativity and the negative sentiment that you get when you enter their place, and to create this alternative place. And what I say is the way I sort of ground myself in the morning when I write Hopium every day is that I start with this basic mantra, right? Which is that Joe Biden is a good president. The country's better off. The Democratic Party is strong, unified, raising tons of money and winning elections. And they have Trump, who is the ugliest political thing that any of us have ever seen in our lifetime, and whose party is a raging, unprecedented dumpster fire, right? And that's how I start my day every day. And then I sit down and I create Hopium, and I do it within that frame of asymmetry, that we're good, they're a raging dumpster fire, which is objectively true in my view. And then I build an understanding of the world on top of that. This is what Democrats is. We have to learn how to, to not have Stockholm syndrome, right? Like, we need the doors open into the light, into the hope, into the goodness. And we need to go there, and we need to stay there, and we need to not get dragged back into this other place. That's what they want. They want you to come back into the darkness, where America's a terrible country, where Russia's a virtuous place, where Trump isn't the most ridiculous political figure we've ever seen in our lifetime. They want you to go to this imaginary place, this place that Greg Sargent calls Foxlandia, which is this sort of imaginary place, the upside down, right? We don't have to go there. That's a choice. I don't go there. I don't live there. And part of the reason I know a lot about this is I was a guest on Fox News for 17 years. I did thousands of appearances. I debated this world often. I was not paid. I did it all as a volunteer. And I really came to understand their worldview and how fundamentally I disagreed with it, right? I mean, that presentation, this original version of With Dems, was when I was still on Fox 3 days a week and, having, debating them. I left Fox because it just became impossible to continue to have any kind of anything that resembled, civil discourse. And particularly because during Trump, Fox not only sort of went into MAGA, but there were times I was going on air where they would talk about things that I had no idea what they were talking about because it's all this kind of obscure conspiracy theory, invented stuff. And I would literally be asked questions like, I don't really know what you're talking about on air, right? Like, I'm not sure that what you're describing actually happened, And so we don't have to go there. Going there is a choice. Viewing America as a disappointing project, that's a choice. These are all choices we get to make. And what I'm challenging you to recognize is that we all have to do more to reclaim the integrity of our daily discourse in America. Our discourse has been poisoned. It's been degraded, by MAGA, by the right, by Rupert Murdoch, by Russia, by China, by lots of actors who have intent here. We don't have to play ball with that. We have a choice. And so, it's and the important thing is that the majority of America is with us. 40% of the country is MAGA, maybe 38% now, right? 40%. We got to stay focused on the 60. That's where we go. And, as all of you know, just to conclude, I've written extensively about how I think we can get to 55 in this election. I think that we can blow it out. I think we can win by 8 to 10 points. This doesn't need to be a close election. I've laid out a whole strategy for how to get us there, frankly. And I think that the reason I believe that is that I think Trump is going deeper and deeper into a politics that has already failed multiple times and is becoming smaller and smaller. MAGA is shrinking. It's losing Republicans. It's losing moderate Republicans. It's losing independents. And that we're growing and we keep expanding and we keep taking stuff away from them. And so I'll conclude by saying, I'm deeply optimistic about what's going to happen in this election. And the fundamental reason why is that Joe Biden has been a good president. We can go sell all that. And when I look at them, I look at the ugliest political thing that any of us have ever seen. The Orange Emperor has no clothes. We're pulling back the curtain from the wizard. These are ridiculous people. They want to do harm to the country. Trump is more loyal to Vladimir Putin than he is to the United States of America. We have to have the courage to say all of these things and not start our discourse by apologizing or saying, Democrats are good, but, one of the last thing I'll leave you with is that I have this exercise I go through, which is we have to get better at speaking in declarative sentences as Democrats. I was an English major at Tufts many years ago. We have to be able to say the Democratic Party is strong, period. Joe Biden is a good president, period. When you add a comma, a semicolon, a but, or however, you're doing MAGA's work for them. When you're bringing their arguments into our discourse, you're doing their work for them. They're pretty good at propaganda. There's no reason for you to become a willing enabler of it. And so we have to spend our time being disciplined, how we engage in our daily discourse, spread more positive sentiment every day, be more optimistic about the future of this country, be more generous, frankly, in your understanding of the complexity of the center-left enterprise that we're all in, and be more generous to one another, be more respectful of the president, right? These are all things that we can do. These are all within our power. And so I want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for being part of this fun project. If you've enjoyed it, please share this with everybody you can, right? Right? Well, Simon, how do we get this to more people? People always ask, well, what are you doing? Email it to everybody you've ever met, right? That's one way we get it to more people. I mean, if everybody here today, there's 127 people, you email it to 100 people, we're starting to get into the, many thousands, right? So thanks, everybody. Keep fighting hard. If you're not a Hope member of the Hopium community, join us. And I'm just really grateful for you being here today. Thank you so much.